What is a 1 in a million thing that happened to you that will never happen again? One time I pointed at the sky one night and told my little brother, watch this, and a ducking shooting star came and went. Dude. When I was young, me and my good friend were looking and were talking about shooting stars and saw one right away. It was wild. I took a job in a somewhat remote area of northeast China about 20 years ago. I had 2 roommates, one American and one Canadian, and we were part of just a handful of foreigners out of about 2 million Chinese in that area. Fast forward 10 years and I'm back in the USA. I was dating a girl who was going on a girls trip to Mexico. She and her girlfriends went out to a bar and got to talking with another group of people. One of the guys there started showing photos from his travels, and lo and behold, there I am. He was my roommate from China a decade before, and while chatting with these girls decided to share the pictures of his travels. After a few of those prove that you know him questions, they both flipped out. Small world. Edit. Wow. I woke up to a lot of notifications this morning. I went through and read them all though. Thanks so much for sharing your small world stories. I was playing beer pong years ago. Definitely past my limit on drinks. This really pretty girl shows up to the party and asks how to play beer pong. I start explaining the rules, and when I got to trick shot, she asked what they were. Never breaking eye contact, I threw my ball up, which hit the ceiling fan blades, which were going at full speed, and went straight into a cup. After laughing for 10 minutes, we all tried to recreate the hole-in-one. Never even slightly close. I ran into Bill Murray at the Dallas Art Museum on a school trip, and he gave me wrong directions to the Asia exhibit. This sounds like the best possible answer he could have given to me. I don't know the actual stats, but I won one of those gold PS4 sets back when Taco Bell was doing their sweepstakes. I won a PS4 from a sketchy video game history quiz, and they shipped it all the way from India. I have no idea what company even sent it. Only that to this day the PS4 still holds up, and it's been like 4 years of near constant use. Once upon a time, my brother and I were arriving late at night to a little cabin in the woods. It was winter. It was pitch black outside. And it was freezing. We needed to get a fire lit ASAP. But the firewood was stacked outside the back of the cabin, under the porch. Now, my brother and I used to watch a lot of horror movies together. And again, it was the middle of the night, at a cabin in the woods. It was winter, and it was ducking freezing and pitch black outside. We decided to flip a nickel to see who would venture out to get the firewood. And here's the part that answers the question. The nickel landed on its side. Nobody went under the porch that night. Was smoking outside a hotel in a place a few cities over from me. Homeless man comes and asks me if I can buy him some food. Got to talking over some cheesy chips. Homeless guy was my estranged cousin. I was cutting vegetables in my kitchen and a fly was buzzing around my head, so I swung around with the knife in my hand and sliced the fly clean in half. It could happen again if only you study the blade. I was struck by lightning. 22nd story of John Hancock Tower in Boston, the big glass one, through a conference room window. The storm was very pretty, but I don't go near windows during storms anymore. Edit. Well, this blew up. Since folks are asking, here's my best go at description. The top of my head felt like a bad sunburn, but only briefly. The entire surface of my body felt tingly, like being gently electrified. When it happened, my entire plane of vision was the whitest bright light I'd ever seen. It was very, very quick, as you might imagine. I went back to my desk and googled it to figure out WTF had happened. No cool scars. No after effects other than the story itself. I was doing a hike in Maui, and at the top of the hike was a large waterfall on a sheer cliff face. The moment I got to the waterfall, I heard this earth-shaking rumbling. I could feel the sound, kind of like heavy bass through speakers. When I looked up at the waterfall, a couple of huge rocks were falling down. If I had been a minute faster on the hike, I would have been right below those rocks as they were falling. Terrifying but also breathtaking to see the power of nature. I fell off my loft bed. Did a mid-air flip and landed on a dildo and got a dildo-shaped bruise on my hip. I was in Vegas. Playing roulette. Being somewhat drunk. And a bit of a goof. I was saying I was psychic. And that the next number was going to be 17. It hit. There was some groaning. But I'm an amiable guy. So it was good humored. I then predicted that it was going to be 17 again. My psychic vision said so. Hit again. Haha. It was hilarious. Third spin. Yeah. 17 again. Boys, my vision was clear. Hit again. The whole table was silent. You could hear a pin drop. I'm thinking that was a one-off type of thing. Though the odds aren't quite 1 in a million. Ran into Passenger doing a street performance in Adelaide promoting his new album in 2015. 2 weeks later I ran into him again doing another street performance in Sydney. I did not know of either of these performances before just stumbling upon them. I had a boyfriend in high school tell me of this man he met in Florida who called himself Backpack Jesus and said he planned to walk across the country. A couple years later I meet a kid from California and he tells me he met a guy on the beach in California who called himself Backpack Jesus and just walked across the country. Ducker actually did it. Before Google, I am old. Deal with it. When I was in college, I was trying for about 12 hours one day to remember the name of the instrument you use to take your blood pressure, sphygmomanometer. I was obsessing about still when I went to pick up beer for a party that night. The store didn't have the beer I wanted so I grabbed some random seasonal mix pack. Helped myself to one when I arrived at the party and opened the bottle only to find that the bottle caps had riddles and trivia on them and mine said pressures on the top and sphygmomanometer on the inside. I was about to fall off the staircase at our flat but my reflexes kicked in and I was able to do a handspring and flip forward to land on my feet. It won't happen again and I sure hope I don't come close to falling like that. Was at Dave & Buster's for a friend's wedding reception probably 10 or so years ago. I wanted to play skee ball. I'm not really good or anything. Just liked playing and their machines were in really nice shape. Get $5 in tokens. And the very first game I got a bunch of 100s and ended up beating the score to win the jackpot. I had like 860 points or something. Flashing lights. Siren going off. Everyone looking at me. It takes about 5 minutes for all the tickets to spit out of the machine. It was a giant pile on the floor. Meanwhile, I just wanted to play some skee ball. It finishes and the teenager minding the counter climbs up to the top and resets the jackpot counter. I put in another token and wham. Did it again. Bunch of 100s. Another jackpot, much less this time. The kid working gives me this look like I cheated. You can't play anymore. I gave all the tickets to my friend's daughter and she went on a shopping spree. As many rubber gonads and plastic trinkets to last her a lifetime. I had 2 houses burn completely down 2 years apart from each other. I hope to God the odds are now in my favor. Fun facts, nobody in the houses smoked. Stove was not on. And of course no insurance. House 1 the heating unit caught fire. House 2 it was the hot water heater. Yes the sheet haunts me to this day. I bumped into my teacher on Thunder Mountain in Disney World. We're from Boston. I ran into a teacher from my high school on the street when I was in Singapore for a day, layover on the way to India. We're from Canada. I bought a house in a small town in Ohio about 2 hours from Columbus. My wife and I decided to go to a random Ohio State game since we have never been and got tickets off StubHub. When we got there, we ended up sitting next to the people we bought our house from. I cut a fly in half while it was flying with a set of scissors. I do have witnesses. I was more surprised than anyone. When I was looking to adopt a cat from the dozens available at the animal shelter, there was one very special one way up high near the ceiling, perched on a stack of boxes, looking down right into my eyes. When I said, "Would you like a loving home?" he let out an enthusiastic MROW. and worked his way down through all the other cats and started arching his back against my leg. The attendant said that in all her years at the shelter, she'd never seen anything like it. And I sincerely doubt it's ever happened since. Same here. He's a huge DSH black boy. He was in a cage by himself outside, type of accommodation reserved for the special animals. I was there with my kiddos. On our way out, having not found an animal that was a good match for my family. And my oldest kiddo points at this absolute unit of a cat staring at us from his tower. I nervously look at the attendant, whiling her to say he's not for you, kiddo. And she says, oh him. He's lovely. And reading my face, he won't hurt you. Cue open door to the cage. Lockie, the cat, jumps down to face level with my kiddos. Who, despite my warnings they were to approach the animal slowly and calmly, which they had been until this point, ran at him and smothered this horse-sized cat. He just sat there not moving at all. After 15 minutes or so of interaction, I said it looked like we'd found out cat. At which point he jumped through the kiddos, trotted out of the open door and up to the exit, where he turned, and seeing as how we were still in his cage in stunned silence, meowed and sat down looking at us as if to say, well, are you coming? His gifts to the family have so far included many lizards, a bird, and an eviscerated possum. I'm trying to teach him to bring us leaves. Edit. Thanks for the silver stranger. The power went out in my house. So I walked into the living room and said to my family, why are you sitting in the dark knowing there was no power? As I said it, I flipped the light switch just as the power came back on. My husband and I met in our late 30s in Indianapolis, Indiana. Both living there. We were born in the same hospital and lived in the same housing addition as children in Riverside, California. And our fathers worked together. I don't know if it is 1 in a million, but my wife started leaking amniotic fluid at 21 weeks. They told us there was nothing they could do for the baby. We were so anguished at the thought of losing him. The fluid was very low and she was constantly leaking. They wouldn't even admit us to hospital until she was 23 weeks. It was about 10 days out. It was the longest 10 days of our life. We were going to the doctor constantly just for them to monitor and get a sonogram. The day before she hits 23 weeks, my wife says she doesn't feel like she is leaking anymore. Our fear is that she has run out of amniotic fluid. On the morning of 23 weeks we go to the doctor and get a sonogram. The plan all along was as soon as we hit 23 weeks, we go to the doctor's office to confirm fluid level. And then they were going to send us to the hospital straight from there. Somehow the amniotic sac that was ruptured has sealed. To everyone's surprise, the fluid was back to normal range. We are all in shock. The doctor tells us to just take it easy and we can head home. My wife delivers our son at full term with no health issues. Everyone at the hospital tells us how lucky we are to have the amniotic sac seal. After the birth, the doctor tells me that in the 40+ years of delivering babies, he could count the number of times on one hand that he has seen amniotic sac rupture seal. I don't know the odds, but I do know my wife and I are incredibly lucky to have our little man. He is 10 months old today as well. I went to college in a major city with public transit. My city also has a big homeless mental health issue, as the trains are relatively cheap and many run 24/7. Unfortunately, the mentally ill tend to use it as shelter. I was riding to work early one morning when a young, obviously homeless, man approached me. I thought he was going to ask for money. Instead, once he stopped in front of me, he reached down and hugged me. I was 19 years old at the time. It was gross. He wouldn't let go. I promptly clonked him over the head with my water bottle. Eventually he let go and walked away. I thought about calling the police, but they never come in this city. 5 years later, I was taking the train again. A man approached me, and something about the situation felt familiar. I looked up, and sure enough, it was the aggressive hugging man. I recognized him right away. I've been through this before. I said, "Do not hug me." The aggressive hugging man got the memo and left me alone, but then began approaching other women on the train, trying to hug them. I had enough and decided to report it to the police. They didn't come, as expected, so I stopped by the station. The detective I spoke to showed me some pictures. Apparently this man had randomly hugged 75 other women back when I first encountered him in a period of a few weeks, most of who were underage. He spent some time in jail, but was apparently back at it. The next time I saw him I gave him my friend's business card, who is a social worker, and this dude now has housing, a part-time job, and I don't think he's going around hugging random women anymore. I kicked a basketball into my basketball net from roughly 50 feet away. My driveway is on a 40-degree angle, so the ball came rolling back. On my second attempt I shattered one of the windows on my garage door. I was substitute teaching a gym class. The class was sitting at the 3-point line. I was facing them, telling them what we were doing that day. Had a basketball on my hip. Kid raised his hand. I bet you can't even shoot a basketball. I stared at him and tossed it backwards over my head with one hand. They howled in shock. Apparently it went in. I never broke eye contact with the kid. Alright. Line up. Cool cats don't look back. I was standing outside listening to my friend tell me how he had been fired earlier that day. He had just finished the story and said, "So yay, man. Been a rough day." When a bird pooped right on his head. I was in my small high school's band and my senior year we marched through Disney World. Various high schools are selected to do this on a regular basis, but we only went once in my 4 years. About 20 years later I returned to Disney World with my kids. On the first day we were at the park. Within the first hour there, my high school marching band came marching down the street. One day when I was walking around downtown where I live when I found some money on the ground. It was pretty windy that day and I saw what looked like a bill coming towards me, so I did my best to catch it. When I finally got it, it turned out to be a $100 bill. Not a crazy story, but it made feel like that bill came specifically to me for some reason. I was walking with my kid daughter to our knitting group. Always held at a coffee shop, which was nice enough to never ask we buy stuff, because I couldn't afford it. She asked if maybe, just maybe, we could get lemonade this time. I told her no. No money. She points and asks with excitement, "What's that?" Yeah. That was a $20 bill just laying in the gutter in the middle of a big parking lot. We had lemonade and bagels. Was at the Texas American Legion convention a few years ago. They had been selling tickets all week for door prizes as a fundraiser. I was talking to someone when they called the first number and got a winner. While the winner is going up on stage to get his prize, the guy I am talking to says I better get my tickets out and they may call my numbers. I pulled 5 tickets out of my pocket and tore one off. I said, "Don't bother, they're going to call this one next." They did. I won a stupid baseball cap. Really? Freak event like that and I get a bull cap? Damn. A wasp flew through my bedroom window one day. I reacted by kicking it across the room and out the window. I was driving behind a large truck which threw up a rock from its tire. Cringing in anticipation as I hope my windshield isn't damaged. I feel a sharp pain on top of my head. I found the piece of gravel stuck in my hair on top of my head. Came over the car and fell through the moonroof. I was given a free cruise by a woman I know who just didn't want to go travel around the Mediterranean alone. Plus side, it was not a scam. I went. And it was awesome. Downside, I didn't find out until we were there that she was racist. Tried to cut long lines. And thinks all Muslim men are terrorists. I was paid $20 by a sheriff that pulled me over for a broken headlight. I knew it was out and hadn't had time to fix it. I had one left over from replacing the other side a month prior. I let him know this when he pulled me over. Turns out someone in the county donated $300 for these kinds of incidents and he still gave me $20 even though he knew I had one. My cousin had kids with this woman I only met once. She lives in Boston. He lives in Jamaica. I live in Maine. One morning I was running late from work and decided to take an alternate route. I got so confused and stressed out transferring to different trains I got myself lost and ended up at the stop going to the ferry, which is ridiculously far from where I was headed. Anyway, I was walking on the platform toward the map and this small kid runs up to me and jumps into a hug. I'm confused. I look up, and it's my cousin's baby's mother and his 3 kids on their first trip to Nick, to the Statue of Liberty. When in middle school I had this strange nightmare. I was at my elementary school again walking down the hall to leave for the day, then the halls emptied out and I was walking alone. Then I hear someone call me into the cafeteria as I was about to walk by it. In there was a teacher of mine sitting next to the school's speech therapist, who was a kind of creepy lady. And beside them sitting at the lunch table was a small Jack Russell dog with its back turned to me. For some reason it was this eerie David Lynch-like vibe as I walked up to them. They asked me to sit where the dog was. I said something indicating I couldn't because the dog was there. Then the dog turned around and there was this horrific blurring of all the colors in my vision and I woke up. So, just a weird, seemingly meaningless dream. Years later, I am high school aged and watching TV flipping through channels. And the cable keeps having some weird interference where the colors on the screen look like they smear around. Suddenly I flip to a channel with a rerun of the show Frasier and the Jack Russell from that show is sitting in a chair with its back turned. It turns to the screen. And that exact moment the colors on screen blur like in the dream. Just a coincidence. But still. Was super weird and eerie. Out in a boat on a lake trying to catch fish. Not having any luck. See an osprey dive out of a tree into the water. Osprey comes up with a fish and starts to fly away. A bald eagle dives out of another tree and attacks the osprey in mid-flight. Osprey drops the fish. Eagle continues to rip into the osprey. Pretty cool, right? Not over yet. A huge raven drops out of a third tree, plucks the falling fish out of mid-air, and flies away with it. No one believes this story. I mean, it is a fish story, right? I'll never see that again. Damn smart raven. The cinnamon roll. I threw a Halloween party this year for my gaming group. We had beer. I made homemade pumpkin soup. And we had pumpkin cinnamon rolls for dessert. We spent the night drinking and playing All Flesh Must Be Eaten, Zombie TTRPG. Several beers in, I go to serve up the cinnamon rolls. Everyone is served up. And I go to take mine back to the couch. I drunkenly fail a dex save and trip, falling over the coffee table and onto the couch. My plate, cinnamon roll still in place, lands on my head. Perfectly balanced. My nickname in the group is now Cinnamon Roll. One time during a thunderstorm, I was looking out my window, and I saw lightning strike the electric wires, and blue streaks of electricity shot down the wires. It was incredible to see. I recruited a buttload of Uber drivers during their launch in many US cities. I was a driver and for a few months Uber was offering $250 for driver referrals. You got paid after your referral completed 10 rides. I took out a Craigslist ad under food beverage hospitality. I recruited 30 or so drivers. Once I saw the money in my account, about a week later, I went gangbusters across the US. I spent $1,300 on Craigslist ads. I made over $30,000 for just 1 month worth of computer screen time. The money kept coming over the course of the year, as some referrals were slow to sign up.